5 Mercury engines to avoid, and the 3 that prove why boaters still choose them. Mercury builds some of the most innovative outboards on the water, and some of the most expensive headaches in marine history, from the same engineering team. Ask mechanics who builds the best technology. Mercury comes up constantly. Ask who they'd buy with their own money. Mercury barely makes the list. Let's start with where Mercury actually loses people, because the pattern is more specific than just bad luck. The first one is the early Verado V12, and this is the engine most boaters already associate with Mercury's reputation taking a hit. When it launched in 2021 with 600 horsepower, it shipped with a steering position sensor wired directly into the engine's control computer. If that sensor lost signal for even a moment, the engine assumed steering had failed and dropped into a restricted safety mode, sometimes while the boat was still moving. Mercury issued a recall in Australia and the UK to fix it, but owners outside that window faced repair bills mechanics described as running from $7,000 for a sensor up to $73,000 for a full engine replacement. The technology itself was groundbreaking. The execution in year 1 wasn't. The second is anything in Mercury's lineup that requires specialized dealer service and gets bought somewhere without one nearby. This isn't a single model, it's a pattern mechanics keep describing across Mercury's bigger platforms. The V8 and V10 engines need proprietary diagnostic tools that most independent shops simply don't have access to, and Mercury restricts a lot of that access to authorized centers only. One mechanic put it bluntly, Mercury makes great motors, and Mercury also makes expensive problems, because when something does go wrong on these engines, the bill tends to come with an extra zero attached compared to fixing the same kind of issue on a competitor's motor. Mercury's early V8 300 horsepower models specifically had documented issues with power steering systems and gear case durability when they first launched. Most mechanics say those particular issues have been worked out in later production runs. But reputation in the boating world moves slowly, and plenty of buyers are still cautious about anything from that early production window. The third is buying a small Mercury outboard without knowing what's actually inside it. Mercury doesn't manufacture their own engines under 60 horsepower. Those are built by Tohatsu, a Japanese manufacturer, on the same assembly line, using the same parts, for a noticeably lower price under their own name. You're not avoiding a bad engine here. The Tohatsu-built motor is genuinely solid. You're avoiding paying extra for a badge on an engine you could buy directly for less. The fourth is older Mercury. Two-stroke models bought purely because the price looked good at a used boat listing. Before Mercury fully committed to four-stroke technology, their two-stroke lineup had a reputation that was, depending on which mechanic you ask, more personality-driven than dependable. Several mechanics specifically noted that Mercury's older two-strokes carried real quirks that the company has since worked hard to engineer out of their current four-stroke lineup. If you're shopping used and you see an older Mercury two-stroke, priced well below similar four-stroke competitors, that price gap usually exists for a reason. The fifth is any high-horsepower Mercury bought without budgeting for the actual cost of ownership beyond the sticker price. A Mercury Pro XS250 lower unit reportedly costs around 3 times what a comparable Suzuki lower unit runs, and roughly twice what Yamaha charges for the same kind of part. That's the difference between a $5,000 repair and a $15,000 repair on paper, for what is functionally the same job. And a lower unit rebuild isn't a rare event either. Anyone running shallow water, unmarked channels, or sandbar country eventually strikes something underwater. It's less a question of if than when. None of that shows up when you're standing at the dealership comparing horsepower numbers, but it shows up fast the first time you actually need the part. So that's 5 real reasons Mercury shows up so often in mechanic complaints. Now here's the part that explains why. Despite all of that, Mercury still holds something like 40% of the American outboard market, more than any other single brand. The first reason boaters keep choosing Mercury is the Verado line's 2-speed transmission, the one piece of engineering nobody else has matched. Every other outboard on the water, from every other manufacturer, has one gear. Mercury's V12 has two, an actual automatic 2-speed gearbox that delivers heavy, low-end torque to get a loaded boat up on plane, then shifts into a fuel-efficient gear for cruising. Nobody else in this industry has put that into a production outboard. If you want that specific capability, Mercury is currently the only place to get it. The second reason is the steerable lower unit, the system that changed how big boats handle entirely. Instead of swinging the whole engine to turn, only the gear case rotates underwater, while the engine itself stays still. That lets Mercury mount engines closer together, swing further per turn, and let one driver dock a multi-ton boat solo using a joystick. Captains who've run both describe the difference as immediately noticeable the first time they take the wheel. The third reason is Mercury's dealer network itself, which sounds boring next to horsepower numbers, but matters enormously in practice. Mercury Marine is owned by Brunswick, the largest recreational marine company in the world, and that means an enormous service infrastructure behind every engine they sell. One mechanic shared that he personally switched his own center console to Mercury, not because he thought it was the better engine on paper, but because there were no qualified technicians for high horsepower motors of any brand near his marina except Mercury's. Having a dealer nearby beat having a theoretically superior engine he couldn't get serviced. So, where does that leave Mercury? The 5 problems above are real, documented, and worth knowing before you buy. But the 3 strengths above are also real, and they explain exactly why Mercury hasn't lost its position despite every one of those documented issues. This isn't a brand that's bad at building engines. It's a brand that consistently builds the most ambitious technology in the industry, and occasionally ships the rough edges of that ambition straight to the customer before they're fully worked out. What this actually comes down to is what kind of boater you are, more than which brand is objectively better. If your priority is starting every single morning with zero drama and minimal repair bills over a 10-year span, the mechanic data points toward Yamaha or Suzuki more consistently than it points toward Mercury. But if you specifically want the engineering nobody else has built yet, the 2-speed transmission, the steerable lower unit, the joystick docking on a multi-engine setup, Mercury remains the only place to get that technology, full stop. There's no other brand you can shop instead and end up with the same capability. That's not a small detail. It's the entire reason Mercury keeps selling engines despite the repair bills mechanics keep warning people about. You're not just paying for an outboard. You're paying to be first in line for technology everyone else is still trying to catch up to. It's also worth saying that Mercury's position in the market isn't static. The same company that shipped the early V12 with sensor problems in 2021 has spent years since refining that platform, and a lot of the early complaints mechanics raised about specific production runs simply don't apply to engines coming off the line today. Reputation lags behind engineering. The Mercury most mechanics are describing when they talk about expensive repairs is often a few years behind the Mercury currently sitting on a dealer's floor. Which side of Mercury have you actually experienced? The groundbreaking tech or the expensive surprise? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you want more of these breakdowns.